Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Frank Barker, and I have the honour to be the CEO of Bacula Systems. I'll be joined today by one of our co-founders, Arno Lehmann, from our technical team. Our topic today is business continuity, disaster recovery, and guarding against ransomware. So what specifically are we covering today? Well, we'll look at some of the key fundamentals around ransomware and how to protect against it. We'll build on that to bring in some best practices around business continuity. We'll look specifically at bare metal recovery, which should be a key element in any recovery plan. We'll outline some of the key security elements in backup to protect against ransomware. And then finally, we'll cover disaster recovery planning. For ransomware, everyone on this call is well aware of ransomware. It's been around a long time. It hits the mainstream press every now and again, probably the most recent examples being the WannaCry attack, which is already over 3 years ago, that hit 150 countries and, to the best of our knowledge, over 200,000 computers. More recently, we've had the Travelex attack that has put them offline for weeks, and from which they are still recovering. The reality is we can expect these kind of attacks to continue to increase. The current coronavirus public health emergency offers attackers a great vehicle for phishing and planting of malware. As we all seek additional information on this horrible disease, we click on new links that in the past we would have perhaps been more wary of and avoided. This is an attacker's dream scenario. It's obvious that to protect any enterprise or any other organization takes a lot of advanced preparation, thought, and planning, and that an out-of-the-box single solution panacea is an illusion. It's also obvious to us in the backup industry that backup is an organization's last line of defense, and as such is extremely critical to get right. Before we go too deeply into ransomware, I need to give a short tutorial on Bacula. Bacula is used extensively in organizations large and small around the world as a key part of their backup strategy. It has a wide range of features, is very modular, and gives high efficiency, reliability, and robustness, which are key to any backup, or more importantly, any recovery scenario. It also has a business model that significantly drives down costs. It was architected and designed to be deployed across an organization's entire infrastructure, whether that be physical, virtual, container, cloud, and any hybrid architecture involving all of it. It does all of this from a single software platform, Bacula Enterprise Edition. How do we help our customers? So Bacula is extremely secure and used by some of the world's most secure organizations. It provides the security an organization needs. In addition to this, you'll typically find Bacula used for one or more of the following reasons. Cost reduction, coming from the breadth of the offering and its business model. Single platform view, one view of the backup and recovery capability of an organization, while the actual work may be well distributed across the organization. And finally, the reason we do backup in the first place is recovery, and Bacula provides fast recovery. The way our product is architected gives an insight into its popularity. On the left-hand side, we have many user interfaces which can be mixed and matched to the user's need. Our flagship graphical user interface, Web Management Suite, a REST API for automation, command line and scripting for those who prefer that. On the right-hand side, we have many storage options. Again, you can mix and match. Tapes, auto changers, virtual tape libraries, disks and disk array, cloud and all of its flavors, appliances and deduplicating storage devices. In the middle box, we see some of the key solution areas where we have created specific technologies. In hypervisors, KVM, Red Hat, VMware, Xen, Proxmox, where we have the broadest range in the industry, and now including Docker and Kubernetes clusters. We have technologies to help bring speed and flexibility to backup, like NDMP and SAN shared storage. We cover the Microsoft world. We have single item restores for virtual machines, Exchange, and NDMP. We have different backup products for different needs: automated client-initiated backup, or bare metal recovery, or data compression, or CDP. We have tools for a large number of databases: SAP, HANA, Oracle, MySQL, many others. And within all of this, we have some specific capabilities to protect against ransomware. This is an incredibly wide capability, which enables us to do the job cost-effectively and securely for most organizations. It also enables us to provide the key elements of a business continuity and disaster recovery plan. I think I've probably said enough about Bacula, so let's get back to the main topic of today: business continuity, disaster recovery, and guarding against ransomware. So let me hand over to Arno.
Hello. Well, good to be able to present the more technical part that we are going to get into. And of course, we will start with the basics here from the ground up, working our way towards a more wide approach and view on things. And we will, of course, first consider what is really essential for effective protection of your backups of the backup data, so that actual restores, when needed, can reliably happen. For that, of course, we have some very common and well-known considerations. For example, you would make sure that you are using credentials that are actually designed to be used only for specific purposes. For example, just make sure that when you're storing your backups, the final storage system is not accessible by plain user credentials, and nobody who does not need to access that has access to that. All of that is well known and no surprise, but needs to be reiterated at times. Well, because everybody knows convenience usually comes into the play. And at that case, you should be rethinking things a bit. We also all know about that offline storage should be part of the backup and recovery strategy, because when things really get bad, the offline and inaccessible backup media may be the best thing you can have. In particular, when we're talking about ransomware, backup data could be encrypted. In that case, something that is not even accessible from the exposed systems is, of course, your best choice to get data restored. We need also to make sure that we have usable backups that we can restore from available when they are needed. And that means you should be following this very common 3-to-1 rule. Just make sure that you have a number of backups on different media in different locations. And of course, and very important, when you're storing backups, the backup data themselves, you must make sure that they cannot easily be tampered and worked with. One very common approach there was to make sure that, for example, you're using a non-Windows file system to store your Windows data on, because a Windows appliance may not be able to access those. But we recommend to not rely on that, simply because ransomware and the people working with ransomware and using that as a business are not stupid, and they know exactly what they are doing, and they are going to tackle those approaches as well. It's just a matter of time. So based on those very basic ideas, of course, we can build upon the details a bit and refine things, what needs to be done to be able to actually use your backups as your last line of defense in case of a ransomware attack. That is in particular important because in many of those cases, you really need bare metal recovery capabilities. Simply because this may be the only way to very quickly get Linux and Windows systems back up and running again from scratch. Essentially, you need to be able to replace ransomware encrypted machines to some point in time very quickly, including user data and everything else. For hypervisors, things are usually a bit simpler, but this is not about being able to find individual files that somebody mislaid or deleted. This is about being able to quickly restore complete large IT environments from scratch. That means You should be able to use either way of file-based or image-based backups, whatever is needed to get to a working state again. This can be file-based backups as they are usually done by Bacula, which we can use for bare metal recovery as well. It can be block-based backups, image backups of disks, which Bacula is usually doing for some hypervisor systems. You need to combine both of them, and you need a tool set and in particular procedures and processes to make good use of both those capabilities. And considering that all those things may be in place and may work reliably, one thing that often gets overlooked is that all of this needs to be fully tested and proven again and again, even to the stage of being able to do bare metal recovery itself very quickly for your different purposes and systems. This is something that needs to be tested and drilled again, particularly not much time before you actually need it. All of that means, of course, that is something that needs planning and consideration and management. We will come to that at a later stage again. We will now, however, look at how the Bacula architecture provides particular security against ransomware attacks, as we are seeing them today. And one of the reasons there is that the client itself, the client we use to back up data, it does not even know about storage targets. And it does have no credentials to access backup data, even backups done from itself. We have a very strictly separated piece of architecture there, where we have a particular daemon to handle the storage backend, which is the storage daemon, which should be running on a dedicated system, which can also be very strictly secured and does only allow Bacula-related traffic and administrative access and nothing else. The centralized component that handles all the management, all the configuration, and all the operational sides, on the other hand, should also be restricted very tightly. And it doesn't have to be known by users, and no regular user should have access to that. This is something that can be very easily achieved with the Bacula architecture, and we recommend to be very strict in that respect. Those components, of course, they do know how to communicate with each other, but in particular, there is no way for anything to happen to the stored backups without the director initiating some activity. There is no default set of logins for any case where some client needs to store data or needs data to be restored. There is a one-time access credential set created and used, which means a client has no way, without the director intervening, to actually access any data and to see which backups do exist in the first place. Or to summarize again, there is no direct access from any client to any backup storage. There's simply nothing for that purpose in the Bacula protocols that we use, which means that even a compromised client cannot access any backup data. It cannot even overwrite or modify or delete its own historical data, which is, of course, to protect against ransomware that starts encrypting data, a very essential point. On the second side, we have another aspect, which is that eventually we may know about ransomware incidents. Well, everybody knows once they are hit. However, you can usually only notice that after the fact happened. The actual incursions are, in practice, pretty much undetectable. Of course, you know once encryption starts, activity is going on. And your backup software knows about that because you will be able to observe a rise in the file change rate, and the backup sizes will be increasing. There may also be file names changing or files vanishing and new ones appearing, which is automatically all tracked by Bacula while it's doing its backup job. And this can be reported on, and it can be observed and monitored easily. One other thing that we do is that we, of course, track everything that we back up on a file-by-file base. And that means that even if we don't know what ransomware files exist in the first place, we will be able to look back in time and find when they appeared. And that means we will be able to help assisting to determine when an incident happened and then be able to determine a good baseline to restore to. That is something that you can do with the Bacula information that we collect anyway. and is no overhead at all, but may be a big help when actually fixing things after something happened. Now, how to detect ransomware activity. We have an example here of a client which is seeing a number of incremental backups, and those incremental backups, they are more or less the same in size. There are only a few spikes which probably can be explained because they happen again and again. So we have one case where incremental backups look fine. We can automatically report on that, and it's also possible to manually observe what happens. Oops, this is not good because here's something missing. Sorry for that. We should be seeing a slide where we see something else. Constant size of incremental backups and then one big spike. That is the thing to look for, and that is a good indication that something went wrong. So how do we do that? And I mentioned that to some extent already. We have different components that are dedicated to the backup purpose only and need no user access, which is the director and the storage daemon. Both of them should not be accessible by clients directly. There should be only a very limited number of user accounts on those machines, and all of those user accounts would obviously be the ones used by backup administrators and operators, nothing else. The final storage target can be on a different system. Very often we find, well, file shares on dedicated NAS boxes, for example. Of course, it could also be offlineable storage systems like tape libraries or cloud storage. And the final storage system needs only be accessible by the storage daemon. There is no need for those storage repositories being accessible by anything else with the Bacula architecture. All of the traffic going to the final storage and being read from the final storage in case of a restore is handled by the storage daemon, passes through it, and all of that happens with the strict authentication, mutual authentication, by the way, managed by the director. So everything that happens happens in a very regulated way, in a very strictly limited way, and we have no way for the clients, which are essentially insecurable, to directly access the final storage targets. There is no such way. And if you build your Bacula infrastructure in a proper way and follow very basic guidelines, this is something that can be avoided. This is exactly what you need with a reliable backup solution, which allows you to actually restore even large numbers of systems without being able to trust the clients, which in the case of a well-designed attack, we can no longer do. Oh, this is the other slide. Sorry for the mix-up. Well, just to reiterate, we have a number of incremental backups, comparatively small. You don't even see a ripple here. And then we have one case where the size increases a lot. And this is probably a date where you want to have a very close look at what was going on there. So, and now that we have probably detected something and we know we are affected, and we started fixing things again, building completely new IT environments in the end, we have an example of what you can do with the Bacula software once you know what has happened. In this case, I took one particular ransomware in a case called the Ryuk system, the Ryuk tool, and we can easily find out that there are some very particular file names involved that this ransomware leaves behind. It has some executable on a Windows system, differently named. There's some extra data files here which can be identified pretty easily. And of course, those file names, they may eventually appear in your backup repositories. Well, we can query the Bacula information for those things, which might look even as simple as this one, which is the very, very basic system to interact with Bacula, simple console program. And we can look for files with those names. And in this case, of course, we find we have a clean system. But if we did not find that, we would exactly know which backup jobs were affected, which time they were run, which clients were affected there. And we could then start investigating and probably even doing something to find out how those incursions appeared. So now, after we have those basic information about what you can do with Bacula, and in particular how Bacula's architecture protects you from loss of data in those cases, We will see how that fits into the bigger picture, because essentially we are doing something else. We're not only playing backup and recovery for the fun of it, but eventually we need to keep the big picture in mind. And part of that big picture is, of course, some sort of disaster recovery, very often revolving around bare metal recovery capabilities, which is much more than just being able to run a bare metal recovery itself, but rather it's also about all the processes around it. You need to know who's responsible for what. You need to know in which order to do things. And of course, you need to know what to do in every particular step of that process, which is essentially a matter of planning and deciding about processes and procedures, which eventually should be something that appears not as a software solution, but in some sort of printed disaster recovery manual for your company or organization. To put things into scope, we have some sort of an example for that, which is actually linked here on this slide, where you can find how to ensure those things work well to some extent, because it's always site dependent, but we do have the experience to actually be able to integrate the Bacula toolkit, the Bacula related processes into reasonably well-designed disaster recovery processes. The disaster recovery itself is, of course, again, only part of something bigger, the whole thing of business continuity, where we're talking about contingency. In particular, very often we are thinking about recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives with backups. But if we're thinking about larger scale attacks, we need to think a bit wider as well. And doing that is something, again, that needs planning at a rather high level in an organization. It also needs, of course, strategic considerations, because IT environments do change, and they are probably changing more quickly these days than they ever did before. And the ability to adapt to new technologies and to implement backup and recovery processes quickly and without too much of a hassle, even with newly evolving technologies or changing toolkits, changing integration approaches, is something that requires quite a bit of flexibility for the whole infrastructure stack. We can work with those things quite well. Frank mentioned before that we do have, for example, support for Kubernetes clusters. We do support a wide range of hypervisors, which allows people to migrate from existing solutions to different toolkits without having to change their complete backup and storage infrastructure in the same place. All of that put together ends up in some best practices. Of course, we are more concerned about the actual backup process, but so we have the item, the first one here, protect your backup repositories as an example, quite at the top here. But there's also other things where we can help and we have some experience with. That is, for example, ensuring that you have different storage backends for backups, so that even if you're storing data offsite in cloud storage, you should be able to restore even if one of those cloud providers has problems. So multi-cloud support comes into the picture there, for example. You should be able to segregate contents according to different needs and requirements, but just being able to not make sure everything gets mixed up, and you have a clear line of, well, clear distinction between different repositories, different purposes, is something that can be done and that should be done. And as I mentioned before, and I usually cannot mention more often, is that disaster recovery plans should not only be designed and tested, but they should be practiced again and again. Very important in many cases is to be able to restore large, high transaction databases, which are kind of a problem in many organizations. We know how to do that. We can help with that. And again, this is something where it is not only a matter of the toolkit, it's also a matter of making the right decisions at the right time and getting the right responsibilities into place. We would claim that we are actually the only vendor who can actually work on all those requirements, and we can fulfill them from containers to virtualization systems, to good throughput, to specific database tools. All of that is something we can do. And on top of that, we get a bit of experience with us on how to actually put things together and implement them. So I think at this stage, Frank, it's back to you.
Thank you, Arno. I'll just pick up the screen here. Okay. So, thank you very much, Arno. Just picking up on some of the comments Arno was making. Why do customers love Bacula? I think he covered some of that already in his presentation. But as I said earlier, backup is key to any ransomware strategy. So it's important to choose a vendor you can work with to get this in place. You'll see here some quotes from some of our customers reflecting their views on Bacula Systems. We work very hard every day to earn the right to be the supplier to our customers. And our customer retention rate, which is the highest in the industry, shows it's appreciated. Of course, the backup supplier must be able to do the job of backup securely and provide the protection against ransomware you need. But in addition to this, commercial aspects are very important. Data volumes continue to explode, and the Bacula system has no data volume pricing elements. In fact, it never has. Rackspace, which many of you will know, is one of the world's largest and most professional MSPs, and is using our solution to protect its clients. It's focused on the enterprise space, so it's using Bacula with Oracle Business Suite and a whole host of other applications. There is here given by Matt some very insightful feedback on their experiences with Bacula. It's a useful case study, actually, and there is more of it on our website. Arno referred to the architecture of Bacula earlier as one of the reasons we are so strong against ransomware attacks. This separation into layers inherent in Bacula Enterprise Edition makes us less vulnerable to attack. At the top level here, we have the different user interfaces, giving a single view or a distributed view of the data and backup and the retention throughout the information held across an organization. It's all held in our catalog. Sitting alongside, we have how storage is managed through one or more storage daemons. And of course, we have data compression and deduplication built in. At the next layer down, we have a series of modules specifically designed to integrate and secure a whole range of different technologies, databases, applications, virtualization technologies, including Docker and Kubernetes. And in addition to this, we're supporting over 30 different operating systems. Finally, we have the storage itself, whether it is in the cloud, where we support a very broad range, whether it be disk, tape, or VTL. This layered approach helps give you the security you need and peace of mind. As you look to strengthen your resistance capability to attack, then you want to know that the people you work with to do this are there to help you, and that they have an approach that's a can-do approach to help solve your problems. Here in this trust radius analysis, you will see some of the world's best known traditional backup vendors. Enterprise on the left-hand side, and the more traditionally small business focused on the right. I'm proud to say that our customers rank us higher than the guys who've been at it longer than we have, and we're scoring almost a perfect 10. So we can still improve. So if you want help in making sure your backup line of defense is strong, try us. So let me stop here by thanking you on behalf of Arno and I, and open up for some questions.
All right, we have a couple of questions here. The first question that I see is, can the suspicious activity reporting be automated?
Yeah, well, I think that is one I should be answering because we can handle that at the purely technical level. Essentially, the information, as I mentioned, is all in the Bacula data set that we collect anyway, and it's accessible. It can easily be queried, and it can be automated, of course, as well. We are working on ways to provide at least a good example set of ways to do that and of reports. But essentially, it comes down to as simple a thing as one or two lines in a cron tab for a Unix administrator. So it can be automated, it can be very simple, straightforward, and to the point.
Excellent. I'm seeing a few other questions, and I just wanted to let our attendees know, if you navigate in your Zoom window to the Q&A pane, please feel free to share some questions with us if you wish. The next question that I have is, how are you pricing for Bacula, and is it by data volume?
Okay, so let me take this one. So we price, our pricing philosophy has never been based on data volume, which is actually surprising because most of the backup and restore industry has traditionally priced by data volume. As we came into this as kind of the newer player, we looked at what was really driving the work and the complexity in an IT infrastructure backup and restore strategy. And actually it's more the environments than the amount of data. And so we price by the number of clients, the number of machines that the customer requires to be backed up. And we do that in quite wide ranges, everything from a few tens of machines to many thousands, depending on what the customer wants to do. So it's a very simple pricing model. It's very clear. I think pricing by data volume, which is still the predominant model of the industry, is a very old-fashioned kind of a model. These days, when an organization may have 2, 3, or 4 copies of the same data, as it moves data from the cloud to on-premise to co-hosted locations to wherever, it's really, I think, almost like a blackmail scenario to charge a customer by data volume. So we'll never do that. We never have, we never will, and we have a much more simpler approach. So thank you, whoever asked the question.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. I have another question that just came in. Have Bacula customers lost data due to ransomware attack?
That's a very good question. Let me take this. So to the best of our knowledge, no. Of course, it's not just your backup and restore software that is the solution to a ransomware attack. It takes a whole approach across the organization, as Arno has laid out and as I've laid out in this discussion. So to the best of our knowledge, no. We've certainly never been asked to help a customer recover from a situation of a ransom attack. I would like to think that's because the kind of customers that work with us, the kind of people that work with us, ask for our help and counsel and making sure that they are as protected as possible. But of course, it's a combination of working with customers to ensure that should they have a ransomware attack, they are able to recover. And we have all of the tools and elements in Bacula Enterprise Edition to make that happen. And we're very happy to work with our customers to put them in place. I see we have no other questions, and we're running out of time. So let me pick up here and close off the session. So I'd like to thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you found the session useful. We think we can really help you in your battle to cost-effectively resist ransomware and ransomware attacks, which, as we said, are increasing and increasing and will continue to increase. If you would like to talk some more or try us, please contact us through the Contact Us form on our website, where you will find a lot of other useful data and resources on ransomware and where backup and restore plays in the overall ransomware approach. So let me close by wishing everybody a good day. I wish you all to stay safe and well. And thank you on behalf of Arno and I for joining us today. Have a good day. Bye-bye.